Hey everyone, welcome back to Tobi's Book Corner, where I talk about bookish related things. And in today's video, I'm going to be doing episode 2 of my Reading Around the World series. And last time in the first episode, we went to Argentina, then we went to the US, South Korea, and then finally Cyprus. And today we'll be going to Afghanistan, Nigeria, Norway, and then finally Vietnam as the last destination. So if that interests you and you want to hear my thoughts about books or authors that I've read from these countries, then stay tuned. The first book that I want to talk about is My Pen is the Wing of a Bird. And this is the first ever anthology that is written by Afghan women. And there are 18 short stories in this collection, and it's the first of its kind, and I gave it 5 stars. It was beautiful, impressive, just breathtaking, mind-blowing. And all the short stories in this collection are written in either Pashto or Dari, which are the 2 main linguistic groups in Afghanistan, and they've been translated into the English. And it took 2 years for this collection to get put together. And Untold, which is a writers development program for writers in marginalized countries which are either in conflict or post-conflict, and I'm just so grateful that they have worked one-on-one with all of these 18 different writers to put this beautiful translated short story collection together. What I love so much about this short story collection is just that we have the chance to peek inside the minds of these Afghan women. And it's more so the fact that these narratives are owned by Afghan women. It is their voices. It's no biased portrayal of Afghan women that, you know, serves the West propaganda. No, this is their voices. They're coming as they are, with their ideas, with their creativity, with their thoughts, with their intellect. And it's just wonderful to see that on paper. And even though this is a fictional short story collection, there are quite a few stories which are inspired by true events, unfortunately. And the just emotions that will be evoked within you when you read this book, from absolute utter joy and pleasure and hope and love and just all these wonderful feelings, to complete despair and tragedy and loss, and just that juxtaposition of all these different emotions as you go from story to story. There are 18, so you just go on an absolute roller coaster of emotions. It just takes you on a journey. There's gender identity, which is explored. There's family that's explored. The patriarchy, misogyny is explored. The importance of education, the rights and ability to be able to work and be self-sufficient, inequality, and just so many wonderful themes that are explored. And all these Afghan women who have written in this collection are so talented. Like, there genuinely wasn't one story which I was like, this is bad or this is not good. Of course, there are some stories which were more appealing or more compelling, but all of them were good stories, and I absolutely tore through the book so quickly. I don't have the physical copy on me right now because I've lent it to my mum as something I just think is so accessible that so many people will find compelling, will find interesting, and I can't recommend it anymore. Now we're gonna go down and then a bit to the west to Nigeria, my home country, and the book that I want to talk about is, I actually have the book, is The Death of Vivek Oji by Akwaeke Emezi. And I have quite conflicting feelings about this novel because the writing, oh my gosh, Akwaeke Emezi's storytelling, oh my gosh, stunning, beautiful, captivating, riveting. Just, she used a certain plot device that doesn't do it for me, just takes me out the story, just puts me off. Vivek is found dead at the beginning of the book, not a spoiler, and we aren't actually told their story from their perspective. We're told their story from the perspectives of their loved ones after their death, which I thought was a really, really interesting technique that Emezi used. Vivek in this book has a very distant father, has a very caring but also overprotective mother, and you really see how their parents really struggle as Vivek is coming to terms with who they are, and that's in terms of their sexuality, their gender, and the way Emezi explores sexuality and gender identity is, oh, there's nothing like it. It is superb, superb. And the prose is, it's not quite lyrical, but it is captivating. It's just very, it's the only way to describe it. And from the first page, you are transported to the streets, to the markets, to these homes in Nigeria. Like, you're transported like that. That's how captivating, that's how immersive Akwaeke Emezi's writing is. What I love there is this mystery element, because you're not actually told how Vivek OG has died, and his mother is desperate to find out, and you kind of go on that journey with her as we unravel the events that led to the tragedy, to Vivek OG's death. You also have so many scenes of joy as you see these wonderful friendships that Vivek has made in his life, and you see things from his friends, those close around him, their perspectives of the Vivek they knew, because the Vivek they knew is very different to the Vivek his parents knew. And you see how a lot of children who they've grown up in very religious households or countries, how there tends to be that split in their identity. The part of them they will present to society, to their family, to their parents, and then the part of them that they're able to present to their friends, and those where they fear less judgment and they can be more free to be themselves. And the way that's explored is just, yeah, as I said, amazing. My issue was a certain relationship that developed in this book. Just, I was not here for it in the slightest. And when that relationship developed, it frustrated me because it did take me out of the story a bit, and especially because I didn't feel like it was necessary for the story, for the plot, for the character studies. I think Akwaeke Emezi could have still explored themes such as sexuality and gender identity without a certain relationship developing. So yeah, but apart from that, I did think this book was superb. I think the, I guess, like, big reveal was slightly underwhelming about what actually happened to Vivek OG. So I would say go into this book less about it's a mystery, it's a whodunit, like finding that out. I think just really enjoy the book as it is, what it is for, which is more the exploration of identity, of freedom, of sexuality, of gender, fluidity, of relationships, kind of coming of age, going from adolescence to adulthood. And that is what this book is about. It's not actually about how Vivek died. So I think if you go into it more with that mindset, then you will enjoy this. It is a beauty, and I definitely will still be checking out much more of Akwaeke Emezi's work, and this I gave a 4 stars. Now we're going to travel from Nigeria to Asia, and we're going to go to Vietnam, and the book that I'll be talking about is On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous by Ocean Vuong, and this is a 5 stars. This is one of my favorite books of 2021, but it's also one of my all-time favorite books ever. I did not expect to fall in love with it the way I did. At the beginning, I was a little bit confused. I thought this might be a bit of a pretentious book, beautiful writing, but that's all. But no, there's more to it. So in terms of what this book is about, plot-wise, there's not too much going on, but essentially it's a epistolary novel, and it is written in the form of a letter from a boy or from a man to his mother. However, his mother is illiterate. She can't read, and essentially that forms part of the narrative because his mother doesn't know so much about him and his identity, and she never is, despite the fact he's written this letter to her, because she'll never be able to read it. And this novel, it explores sexuality, explores identity, explores war, it explores trauma, especially unresolved trauma, it explores PTSD, it explores mental health, it explores substance abuse, it explores addiction, and just so many themes and topics, and not that many pages. And the writing. Ocean Vuong is a poet, as in an actual poet. He's written poetry collections, and this is his debut novel, and as soon as you read the first page, you know he's a poet. His writing is so lyrical and beautiful and poetic. It was the first time I found myself, because I actually read it on my Kindle first, stopping, gasping, and constantly highlighting. And it's the first time, and probably the only time I've ever really done that with a book, because the prose, exquisite. There aren't enough adjectives for me to explain how just gorgeous the writing was in this book. I think what I loved is that the writing was so enchanting and dreamlike, and the way that just perfectly was contrasted against the very bleak and quite brutal themes and topics that were discussed in this book. It was almost like the beauty of the writing just further just illuminated the horror of its content. And so many people talk about how Ocean Vuong, the way he writes about sex, is probably one of the best writers to do it. It's not smut, it's not steamy or romance, not at all. It is very raw, uncomfortable, and he just captures some of those feelings when people are still unsure about themselves, unsure of what they're doing, seeking connections maybe not from the right places, and the way that is portrayed is done superbly. I really loved how he explores war, because the mother and grandmother in this book lived through the Vietnam War before they migrated to the US, and you see how the impact, oh my gosh, the impact of war, not just on the mother and grandmother, how because of the trauma, the PTSD, this now affects their parenting, and how that is their trauma essentially is intergenerational, is passed down to the protagonist, to the boy, the man writing this letter for his mother, and how, you know, certain abuse he faces or isolation, that was just captured so superbly. And again, it's just another book that really shows how damning, how bleak and brutal war is, and it doesn't just stop when the war ends. The way it just continues to ripple through the lives of just so many ordinary citizens, because they went from Vietnam and moved to the US. The way it really explores immigration and class and racism as well, just everything it explores was done superbly. And if you need a book that has a lot of plot, this will not be for you whatsoever. No, whatsoever. It's very non-linear. The structure of this book, there's a lot of going back in time to the war, to Vietnam, and then the present, and then different times like their childhood, their adulthood, and it's just very non-linear. So if you need something which is very straightforward, very structured, very linear, a lot of plot, not for you. But if you don't mind things where there's character study, not deep dive into character study, but the characters are almost more there to explore these different themes, to capture the way this main character is struggling with identity, being an immigrant in the US who's figuring out their sexuality, figuring out who they are, what they want to do career-wise, how to have a relationship with his family, and just so many things. And if you're someone who just really enjoys a lot of social commentary, but also with just absolutely beautiful and gorgeous prose, then this is a book you would enjoy. And then finally, we're going to go across to Europe, where I will be talking about The Ice Palace, which is written by Tarjei Vesaas and is translated from the Norwegian into English by Elizabeth Rokkan. This is essentially a tale about these two young girls. They're 11 years old, I think, Sis and Un, and they strike up this extremely intense friendship in the span of just one evening. And then the next day, ends up going missing. There's this waterfall which becomes frozen during the winter because of how cold it is in the Norwegian fjords, in this little village that they live in and that this story takes place in. And the children refer to it as the ice palace because of the way it freezes and how majestic and just enchanting it looks. And she decides to go and explore it by herself, following this very intense, weird, but also amazing evening that she had with Sis. However, when she goes exploring into the ice palace, she disappears. She goes missing, she's not found, and you really see how her disappearance, her loss, impacts Sis, the girl she'd just become friends with. And you see how she's trying to deal with grief and her inability to explain or articulate why she feels so affected by Un's loss to those around her, to those close to her, how she withdraws from everyone, and she just, her mind, her thoughts, just feelings become so inwards. And you're seeing is how those around her are trying to pour her out of herself, and how she's resisting and just being in a child's mind as they're trying to deal with something like grief was captured wonderfully in the ice palace. It was just such a poetic illustration of loneliness, of grief, and also of friendship as well. And what was just so ingenious was the way that Vesaas was able to write about the environment, about the nature, about the Norwegian fjords and the snow, the ice, the waterfall. It was almost as if he personified the waterfall, the ice palace, just because of how just enchanting his prose was about. He almost made the environment, the nature feel alive. Such visceral descriptions of the Norwegian fjords. They just jumped off the pages. They just brought them to life, and it was done spectacularly. And although his writing was quite simple, even though the descriptions were quite enchanting, it wasn't because his prose itself was really lyrical or enchanting. It was very simple, very easy to read, but it was so chilling, the atmosphere that he created. And that's of course very appropriate for the fact we're like in winter in the Norwegian fjords with this frozen waterfall, but it did create this very chilling atmosphere, and it just resulted in this coming of age story that was haunting, that was moving, that was tense, even though not that much plot happens after the 11-year-old girl goes missing. There is intentionally quite a lot of ambiguity which is sprinkled throughout the narrative, and what I love is that Vesaas has given us the space, the room to interact with the story, for there to be lots of interpretations. I'm sure this is the kind of book, I think from what I've read, in Norway it's like their equivalent of Mice and Men here in the UK and US, where it is a great book for analysing, for interpreting in many, many different ways. It's definitely the kind of story that will resonate with each reader in a different way, and I just think that's wonderful. It's just a really lovely, gorgeous tale, and I would highly recommend. I gave this a solid 4 stars. So in this episode 2 of my Reading Around the World series, all of these recommendations, they're either 4 or 5 stars. They're all very strong, solid, wonderful books. So I really hope that you may be encouraged to pick up one of these books, or if you've already read them, talk to me in the comments, tell me your thoughts if you also enjoyed them, if you had any issues with them. And I can't wait to do episode 3 of my Reading Around the World series, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye.